Good morning. My name is Mike Hagman. I got to say a couple things about myself, just because it sets a precedent for anybody. If you'd have told me 2 years ago I'd be here talking about this, I wouldn't have believed it. This gentleman here is actually going through worse than I'm going through, but I didn't actually believe that your kids could be taken away from you, your property could be taken away from you, your character could be assassinated, everything you've ever done in your entire life meant nothing as soon as you enter into the family court system. I don't believe the family court system supports families. I think it's completely anti-family. After having to deal with CPS, they contradict everything. They don't do what they say they're going to do. They do the opposite. In my case, we've called CPS maybe 10 times in the last year to try and get help for my kids. A little bit about myself. I'm a registered nurse. I've been an RN for over 21 years. I've been certified by the state of Montana as a mental health professional back in 2018, taking care of thousands and thousands of children. I primarily have worked in psychiatry, taking care of lots of kids, seen a lot of this stuff happen, abuse and neglect, and CPS and family courts getting involved in it. About 90% of the cases with kids in psychiatry with all these mental health issues, they're going through this system, and this is a big piece of why they're in the hospital, because this system is dismantling their families. It takes good parents out of the way, and it puts bad parents in positions of power. And like I said, I've heard all these stories before, and I'm sorry to say that a lot of times I looked at these parents and I kind of judged them. I kind of thought, well, you must have done something wrong. And now I'm one of those parents, and you just need to enter into the system. And the winner and the loser is chosen in advance. So in my case, what happens is, I apologize, this is really hard to talk about. I've tried to do everything right in my life. When I was 17, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I've served in 3 branches of the military, honorably discharged. I was an officer candidate. I got a bachelor's degree in nursing. I got married, moved to Helena. I started a business. I had a home health agency in this town for 7 years. I was a community and home-based services provider through the Veterans Administration. I had an NPI number, Medicaid provider. I've done all this stuff trying to be a public servant and take care of people in the community. I've tried to do everything right. And now here I am in front of you telling you how easy and how quickly somebody who's done presumably everything right, at the snap of a finger, you lose it all in this system. I've taken an oath to the Constitution 3 or 4 times. I've worked for the federal government. I worked at the VA for a period of time. I've worked for the state of Minnesota. I've worked for the state of Montana. I've worked in forensic psychiatry. I've worked in child and adolescent psychiatry. I've done everything. And I never thought that my government would ever do what they've done to me. I didn't think they ever could do it. What this gentleman said about Nazism, that's exactly what it feels like to me. This system is set up to choose who wins and who loses. And if you're chosen the loser, you're thrown into a wood chipper and you're destroyed. And every time you try to use the system to help you, it destroys you further because your credibility is gone. There's no due process whatsoever. You are declared this, that, and the other based on maybe your angry spouse or whatever. whatever they say becomes a law. It goes into the judge's ear, it goes onto a piece of paper, and he rubber stamps it, and whatever it says is what you are, and then you've got to prove your innocence. You don't have the presumption of innocence in family court. If you have an allegation against you, you're presumed and you're punished immediately. I lost my kids immediately. I lost my home immediately. A home that I built for my wife and my kids is gone. I don't get to live there anymore. So I'm just battling constantly inside of my head, trying to wrap my mind around this. Like, I woke up this morning and I had a conversation with myself, and I'm like, this isn't really my life. This can't be real. It's real. This can happen to anybody up here, anybody who has kids, anybody who's married and has children, and you do everything right, and one day your spouse wakes up and says, I want out of this marriage. They can go to an attorney, and they can fabricate anything they want and get you out of your house, and you will never come back. You will lose custody of your kids immediately until they say they're going to decide whether or not you get them back, and then that could take forever. So you're immediately deprived of being a parent. I'm not sure what else I can say, except I've read Teresa's bill. It's very short, but it nails everything that has happened to me, especially the due process piece. There's no due process at all. You get none. The judge has absolute authority. He can if your spouse declares you did something, you did it. He signs off on it. The sheriff comes and finds you, and you're done. And then you got to prove your innocence. I was homeless from January until September. Literally homeless. I'm a registered nurse. I take care of people for a living. I make good money. I have a nice home. I was kicked out of my house. I didn't even get to pack a bag, and I was done. And then they said, oh, and you don't get to see your kids except for when we say you can see them. And if that fits into your schedule, well and good. But if it doesn't, well, I guess that's the only chance you get to see them. And it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse from there. It never gets better. So I guess my question is, how do you justify even one parent who's a good parent, and who was a good parent until the day their spouse made up a story about them? For 20 years, I was a good parent, supposedly. And then in one day, and in 1 second, all of a sudden my credibility is completely impeached and shot, and it's destroyed. And everything I've ever done in my life means nothing to that judge. That judge mocked me in his court when I said I was going to bring character witnesses in. He mocked me and said, well, you can go ahead and bring your character witnesses, and they're going to say all these good things about you. And I couldn't believe the tone he used. It was so discouraging. And it's actually terrifying to know that when you go to court, you already know you're going to lose. He already told me in advance. It doesn't, you can bring anybody you want. It's just a game to him. Family court is set up to dismantle families. It does not help them. It doesn't care about the truth. It only cares about who makes the first allegation. I know if this can be done to me, it can be done to anybody, any of you people, any of your relatives that have children, sons and daughters that are married. It can happen to them. It can happen to your grandkids. And the question I have is, how can we allow this? If this even happens to one person who's a good person, that's one person too many. It's unacceptable. Thank you.
Any other proponents?